So in this video, I'm going to outline 7 reasons why I believe stockpiling and hoarding actually hurts preppers. And I know from the beginning this is going to be very controversial. These are things that people really don't want to talk about, and it's something that's not talked about in our community. Too many times in our community, I feel like we hyper associate preparedness with stuff, having stuff, stockpiling stuff, hoarding stuff. Especially recently. I mean, everything that I'm seeing put out is the common things you should stockpile, the common things you forget to stockpile, things you shouldn't stockpile. And it's just this recurring theme of here is a catastrophe, here is a crisis, here is an event, here is something that could happen, and stockpile. And I think that hyper, focus on stockpiling can be very detrimental, not only to our community, but to us as prepared-minded people. So I think it's important that we do talk about the cons of stockpiling. And with that being said, I do not think that it's a bad idea or that it's bad to have a large inventory of things. For example, if you have a very large inventory of a working pantry, I think that's great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have an inventory of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, water, beans, bullets, flour, sugar, etc. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is when you hyper focus on these items, it can be very detrimental to what your overall goal and mission is. And I'm going to explain 7 reasons why I believe that the hyper-focusing on stockpiling and actual application of stockpiling hurts us as preppers. So I hope you enjoy the video. So number 1, I believe that having a stockpiling mentality when we talk about preparedness instills a mindset of defeat. What do I mean by this? I think the media has done a really good job of looking at preparations from a stockpiling point of view, and obviously popular YouTubers have done the same, but let me give you an example of the Doomsday Prepper reality show. So in that, you have these people that go out, they show you their preparedness lifestyle, their preparedness items, and how they are ready and how they are set, and they are rated based upon their survival time. You have 6 months, you have 9 months survival time. So I really think this is a self-deprecating way to look at preparedness, but this is how we look at it. We look at preparedness and our ability to overcome controversy by setting a time limit on how much you have. So you look at your stockpile of stuff as a resource that is going to go away over time. It is self-depleting. And when I look at my preparedness standpoint and vantage point, I don't see that. I see preparations and I see a starting point. So many people see a countdown timer. I see a starting timer for the journey ahead, because I don't look at my preps as I am a consumer and I have this amount of stuff, and when I consume it and it's gone, oh no. I look at my preparations from this is my starting point, and I am a food producer. So taking food for example, I am not just a food consumer, I am a food producer. I am a creator. And I think that mindset is very important for long-term sustainability and overall preparedness. And too many times in this movement do we see a lot of self-deprecation when it comes to, for example, food sustainability. Now, with that being said, I think having a working pantry is great. Having a large working pantry is great. But there's so many drawbacks when you're just looking at this from a preparedment mindset of, well, this is what I have stockpiled, and this is my survival time. I think that's very self-deprecating, and I think that we should retrain our minds and retrain how we prepare. If you are looking at what your situation is from a self-depleting aspect, you're doing it wrong. Remember, if you are in the preparedness community, if you're a prepper, you are a creator. You are a creator in everything when it comes to food, when it comes to security, when it comes to energy. You are not just a consumer, you are a producer. So that's number 1. Number 2, stockpiling can give you a false sense of security, because now you're putting your trust, faith, and future into materialistic things. It goes back to what we talked about in number 1. You are instilling in your mindset that because you have something, you are able to survive. Because you have things, you are therefore in a position that you are going to be okay. Not based upon anything really tangible, but just because you have stuff. And while I agree with the saying, I'd rather have it and not need it, than need it, not have it. While I completely agree with that, I feel like people take that and they misrepresent what that actually means and what the purpose of that quotation actually is. And so a great example of that I like to tell people is I like to talk about my training experience as a Naval Hospital corpsman, combat medic for those of you outside of Navy circles. We call ourselves hospital corpsmen. And I can tell you without equivocation that I would much rather have a Lance Corporal that I've trained in basic CLS, combat life-saving skills, with mediocre IFAK gear over an EMT with a brand new, unopened, state-of-the-art medical bag. And why is that? Well, I know that Marine, that Lance Corporal, that PFC, that private, that corporal, that sergeant, that Marine that I trained, I know that they know what they're doing. I know they have the ability to be independent thinkers. I know they're combat tested. I know they're battle proven. I know they are going to do the job because I have trained them to do the job. I know that the gear that we're using, as mediocre as it may be, I have trust in its abilities because I've seen those abilities work. I know what the gear does. I trust the gear. And I know that it's going to be able to save my life. Versus the EMT that has a state-of-the-art medical bag, but he has no idea where everything is. He may not know how to use that gear properly, etc. So for me, I like to use this as an example because it's the truth. I'd rather have the gear and need it. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. But at the same time, the person behind the gear is what makes the gear effective. It's not the gear alone. It's not the stockpile. It's not the stuff that's going to make me survive. It's me. It's the user behind it. So just because you have the gear doesn't mean the gear is going to work for you. The gear is going to be effective. I'd rather have that Marine that I know works, that I know is battle tested, that I know is proven with mediocre gear than to have somebody with an advanced gear that can't operate it correctly. And so obviously the best of all worlds would be to have, a search and rescue corpsman with full access to state-of-the-art medical bag with ACLS abilities. But given the cards that were thrown, I would much rather have an operator that is state-of-the-art than gear that is state-of-the-art. So I think it's really important that we don't put a false sense of security in stuff just because we have it. I think we need to take a more realistic approach and be, well, it's great that you have 1,000 rounds of ammo. Do you know how to use it? I think it's great that you have all this food. Do you have a resupply plan? Do you have a plan on how to use it? Do you have a plan on how you're going to incorporate it? And so I think these are important things that we should be talking about. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I think having medical gear is great, and we should have as much medical gear as possible, right? But if we don't know how to use it, and we don't know what we're doing with it, and we're not battle tested, and we're not proven with it, you're really putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. I would much rather have 100 pressure dressings, make sure that my group knows how to use them, than to have 1,000 pressure dressings and a group that's never opened a package. So these are things that you should be thinking about. Number 3, your stockpile becoming a crutch. We see this every year. Stockpiling becoming a crutch that ultimately leads to bad decision making. Examples of this. Every year we have these cool things in the Midwest called tornadoes. In Florida we have these things called hurricanes. In other parts of the country and the world we have tsunamis, etc. Flash flooding. And so you have people that know days in advance that a Category 6 hurricane is coming straight for them. There's no surprises. There's a state of emergency called. They know this hurricane is directly beelining towards them. But they are able to justify staying because they have their stuff. I can't leave my stuff. I need my stuff. We're going to barricade in place because of my stuff. Their stockpile becomes such a part of their preparedness identity that it alters good decision making. Are there times to bug in? Yes. Are there times to bug out? Yes. But at the end of the day, anything that would allow you to make a bad decision based upon irrational fears is a bad decision. And so stockpiling and hoarding stuff leads a lot of the time to people making poor decisions because they don't feel like they can have proper security. If they don't have their 10,000 rounds of 5.56 or their 2,000 pounds of rice and beans and flour. So having this stuff goes back to what we've been saying the last couple of bulletin points here. It causes a false sense of security. They have a defeatist mindset, and it becomes a crutch to making good decisions. So I encourage you and I implore you guys to look at where you're at in your preparedness journey. Are you at a point where you have a lot of stuff? So much stuff, in fact, that you would have a hard time leaving your stuff? If that's the case, you should probably relook at what your preparedness identity is, and more importantly, what your preparedness plan is. And like I said, I understand the mentality of I'm going down with the boat, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But at least own that, and at least understand, okay, this is where my line in the sand is, and then figure out why it is. There's nothing. I mean, the whole point of preparedness is to be sustainable. It's to, protect you and your family. And if you're making decisions that would, go contrary to that, you really have to think about why it is you feel that way and why it is you're doing it. And a lot of time it's because you have so much dependence on your stuff that it causes you to make bad decisions. So I implore you to do a little bit of self-reflecting and really determine, is your stockpile so much a part of your identity that would alter good decision making? Number 4, it seems like stockpiling and hoarding and paranoia go hand in hand. It's like two peas in a pod. And I'll be 100% honest with you, I don't understand it. And maybe somebody that does understand this, or if this is you yourself, you could please explain to me in the comment section below why this is. But I've never understood this. It seems like people that have their identity and their prepper identity and stockpiling have this uncanny fear of paranoia that somebody's going to come take all their stuff. And maybe it's because you do, stockpiling, like I said, it does instill a defeatist mindset. It does give you a false sense of security. You feel like you can do more just because you have stuff, or you're safe because you have stuff. If stockpiling is a crutch of yours, which leads to which leads you to make decisions just based upon your stockpile, I guess I can understand that a little bit. But at the same time, I don't understand why stockpiling is such part of your identity as a prepper that you can't even talk about preparedness without talking about, your stockpile. It's almost like, that joke. Well, how do you know if somebody does CrossFit? Oh, don't worry, they'll tell you. I feel like that's the exact same thing when it comes to stockpiling and when it comes to, preparedness in 2020. I really feel like your stuff has no play or should have no implications in you talking to somebody. I don't understand why you can't talk about preparedness without talking about the 1,000 rounds of ammunition you have and the 6-month supply of food you have in your garage. And again, this identity of having stuff, stockpiling stuff, hoarding stuff, we can see it directly correlates with somebody's and how paranoid somebody is. Like I said, we need to focus as a community on real life preparedness issues. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me just start this off with a couple examples, okay? If you live in a state that would deem seed libraries illegal, that's a direct contraindication to your ability to be prepared. If you live in a city, municipality, or HOA, or your residence is a part of a CCNR that would restrict a rain catchment system attached to your gutters, that's a problem. That's a preparedness issue that you should try to mitigate. If they would prohibit you from having a garden in your yard, that's a problem, an impediment that is a preparedness issue and topic. This is one directly for the Alaska prepper. If you live in a municipality that would deem wooden furnaces to be illegal, that is a direct impediment to your preparedness. And so the idea that as a prepper, you can't have rational conversations with community members, board members, local government, or neighbor across the street about preparedness because, oh my God, they're going to know I have stuff. I don't know where this comes from. That is completely ridiculous. You should be able to write a letter to your HOA board or the assembly body of your CCNR, which would most likely be a panel of your peers, so to speak, of your neighbors that volunteer their time to be on this board because there are no dues. There's just these archaic 1950 rules that were put in place, and you should be able to rationally explain why you want to have backyard chickens, for example. There are so many templates, and there's so many areas where we've seen where people that are not preppers have stood up and said, no, I have a right to garden. I have a right to a seed library. I have a right to rain catchment system. I have a right to gardening. I have a right to backyard chickens. And we've seen this time and time again. And I always reference these because these are people that are doing way more for preparedness than 99% of these YouTubers out there. And they're not even preppers. They just realize that, I think it's important to have a garden. I think it's important to have backyard chickens. I like the eggs. We can see rationally right now in America that the price of eggs has gone up exponentially. Some places it's 40%, other places it's almost 80% increase markup on fresh eggs. So we see that this is realistically happening, and there's no better time than the present to address them. But for some reason, this paranoia of, well, I got stuff, I can't talk about this, really flies in the face of what it is to be prepared. Because if you can't talk about real preparedness issues, it's not going to matter, And this idea that, we haven't hit that transition phase, according to Alaska Prepper, I don't know what that means. I don't understand how preps are somehow a transition phase to food reliance or self-reliance. They're all the same. So until we can really flip that switch and realize what it is that we're talking about, you can expect that people that have this dichotomy of thought are going to remain extremely paranoid, because for some reason, the direct correlation to how much stuff they have is also a direct correlation to how quiet they have to be and how minimal their impact is on their environment as far as their community goes. Because heaven forbid my kid goes over to his friend's house, because if he or she does, he might tell the family friend that I have 1,000 pounds of rice in my garage and 1,000 rounds of ammunition in my safe. Like I said, it's ridiculous. So let's move on to the next one. Alright, number 5. We all knew this was coming. Liability. So, as we can see, the amount of stuff you have, according to people that believe in stockpiling and hoarding, the amount of stuff you have is directly correlated to the people that are going to, how appealing it is to come and take your stuff, right? So the thought process, somebody is going to come and is going to take your stuff by force. And the reason they're going to take your stuff by force is because you have stuff. And based upon the aforementioned arguments that we've already made, they see prepping the same way you see prepping. The more stuff you have, the better prepared you are. The more stuff you have, the more secure you are. The more stuff you have, the more security you have. The more stuff you have, the longer your survival time is, that countdown timer. So based upon that's how we see preparedness in modern day 2020, then yes, I 110% agree with you. That is a lot of liability you have. Your liability is 100% correlated to the amount of stuff you have. And if you think for a second that nobody knows that you are, quote, this crazy doomsday prepper, you're highly mistaken. Everybody knows you're a crazy doomsday prepper. And I see in the comment section all the time, your friends, your family, your kids, your neighbors, the guy that you just met you for 5 minutes. Everyone automatically has this perception that you're a crazy doomsday prepper because you fit the exact mold of what we see online, on TV, in real life, of what a prepper looks like. So absolutely, this is a huge liability on yourself. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not, because it absolutely is. But I think it's funny. You always hear preppers say, everybody thinks I'm crazy, but they're the crazy ones. Look at what's going on now. Ha ha ha. I got my stuff, right? Sure. Okay. I always think it's funny how you have preppers that say, well, people say they're going to come to my house because I have a lot of stuff. And people say when shit hits the fan, Tiawaki, world without rule of law, when all this stuff happens, I'm going to come to your house. And people say that all the time. Well, why do you think they say that for? Because in their minds, they perceive you the way you perceive yourself. I have a lot of stuff, therefore I am okay. They see you as having more stuff than what you need in their mind. And we live in this instantaneous, instant gratification world where, all right, I'm just going to open up a mountain house or an MRE, or I'm going to make this rice and beans real quick and we're going to be fine. Because they're not looking at it from a preparedness standpoint, because you're not really looking at it from a sustainability standpoint. You're looking at it as, I'm going to ride the wave out. You know who these people typically don't say that to? The master gardener that has all the food in their front yard. You know, the John Kohlers of the world, growingyourgreens.com, GYG. People don't see that person as like, oh, I'm going over to that house, because they see food, they know there's food there. But yeah, gardens are a lot of work. Or how about that 4-H guy that has chickens, maybe a goat, you know, a little bit of property. Nobody says, oh, I'm going to go over to his house. Why? That's a lot of work. You know what I mean? And you gotta look at it. Why do people want to step away from that? Well, let's be honest. If you're a marauder, yeah, you want food, but do you really want to sit there at somebody's garden and picking food for hours on? I mean, picking food is not easy. You want to sit there and pick food and put it in your little bag and throw that little bag inside your pickup truck and go? That's not super appealing. Or have you ever had a bunch of mason jars and try to transport them all at once? Things break. That's work. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to actually put in the work. Nobody wants to put in the work to be sustainable. And let's be straight. Those people, they're some of the most sustainable, prepared people out there. They have tons of food. And they don't even consider themselves preppers. You know why? Because it's a lifestyle for them. At the end of the day, if you have a mindset of survival time based upon a countdown calculator because you have stuff, if you put your sense of security and trust and faith for your family's future, in materialistic things and stuff, if you make decisions based upon your stuff because it's your crutch, which leads your decision making, if your source of paranoia and fear is directly related to the amount of stuff you have, then yes, you better believe that stuff is your liability. Let's move on to the next one. Number 6, the likeliness that your stockpile or hoarded gear will expire or degrade to the point of unusability before they are needed. Now, I think we all have seen this. Everybody has seen this. I think the best example we have is produce. I'm sure everybody has seen produce that has gone bad. Okay, but this is not just limited to food, right? You have medicines, bleach, batteries, gasoline, ammunition. Pretty much everything is going to have a shelf life. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, everything has an expiration date. So by the second you get it, it's degrading. The clock, the countdown, so to speak, has already started, right? And so eventually these items will degrade, they will expire. And the likeliness of your gear expiring is directly proportional to the amount of stuff you have. Meaning, the more food you have, the higher likeliness that is going to degrade or expire to the point of unusability before it is needed or before you have the time to consume it or use it. Another great example of this is medicines. I know that there was a huge run on the stores, on big box stores and otherwise, for over-the-counter medications because of this virus. You have lots of people, and I saw this, lots of people taking over-the-counter medications off the shelves in hordes, right? Everything from expectorants to fever relievers, Tylenols, ASA, aspirin, ibuprofen, flu medications, supplements, vitamins, baby aspirin, all sorts of things, right? And they're buying them these big Kirkland containers that have 300 to God knows how many tablets inside of them. And so you really have to think, okay, you just bought 5 or 6 bottles of 500 count over-the-counter flu medication for you and your family. And then you have to think, how many flus are you and your family expecting to have in the next 2 years? Because a lot of that stuff has a 2-year expiration date on it. So then you have to ask yourself, how many flus am I expecting to have in the next 2 years? And I get And I know what you're going to say. Well, I mean, you can use medications way past their expiration date. Well, you can, but they're going to be degrading. And let's say you get a flu in 5 years and the grid is still up. Are you going to tell me you're going to use, while you're sick and have the ability to use new medication, the old stuff, right? So I think this should be definitely a consideration for people, that, you know, the more stuff you have is directly correlated to the amount of stuff that can go bad, you know. And not only can that have a bad detriment to your health, but it can have a bad detriment to your equipment too. I think gasoline is a great example of that. If you've ever put non-shelf stable or unstable gasoline into an engine, you can really damage an engine, whether that's your car, generator, or small engine of any kind. You know, and I'm not even talking about the wasted resources and money aspect, because let's face it, it's your money. You can do what you want with it. But like I said, I think working inventories are great, and I'll probably do another video why I think working inventories are good. I think working inventories are great because it's exactly what it sounds like. It's work. It's something that you are using, and it's something that requires you to calculate what you need. That's why working pantries are so outstanding, because you are putting in the work and you're actually seeing what you're needing, based, like for a working pantry, based upon nutrient density, calories, number of people consuming, number of serving sizes. I mean, you can really get some good math on working inventories when you actually put in the work. But it's so much easier just to buy a bag of rice and say, I'm prepared. So, number 6, just remember, the more stuff you have, the more likely it is that it's going to expire or degrade to the point of unusability. Last but certainly not least, the narrative. You know, in modern day 2020, you go to any prepper YouTube video, any big name YouTube video, blog post, website, and this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a bunch of gear reviews. You're going to see a bunch of supplies you can buy, gear you can buy. Here's a discount. Get on our newsletter, and we'll send you some good stuff. And while I'm saying that's not bad, I mean, there's nothing wrong with product reviews. There's nothing wrong with gear. And like I want to reiterate, I do not think that having a working inventory is a bad thing. And we've already discussed, I think anything that you do based upon science, logic, reasoning, I think is good. You know, and I'm not going to sit here and say that having a working inventory is bad, but we see that that's not always the case. You know, what we're seeing more and more is this idea manifesting that your survival for the future of your family, the trust that you need to put that you're prepared, relies in things. And I think that we really need to take a step back and really ask ourselves, what is the means to the end? Okay? What are these things really supposed to do? And then be really critical of those ideas. You know, be really critical of what the end game is and what the overall goal is. So this comment that I have here really goes to explain what it is that I'm talking about. Here you have a person that obviously cares about his family, and he is stating that the virus is the least of our problems and that we really need to be prepared for a recession, global financial collapse, food shortages, insert crisis here. And how he plans to safeguard him and his family is by donning his protective equipment, his PPE, every day and going to the store and buying more stuff. He says he's never going to stop preparing, which in his mind is going out and accumulating more stuff. He's never going to stop doing it because it's for his wife, it's for his kids, it's for their future. And even if something does happen, they're going to be okay for a while. And bottom line is, this is what preppers do. And I think this is a really dangerous narrative to be, you know, perpetuating, because preparedness is more than just stuff. I think that his family, and I'm not going to speak to him because I don't know him, I don't know his family, but I think it's better to have you preparing sustainability for your future than a stockpile of stuff that will eventually either expire, degrade, or be used, and that's it. I think that his legacy is best served in other ways, but I can't speak for him. This is obviously what he feels, but in my mind, in my honest opinion, this is not what preparing is. There are definitely better ways, in my opinion, to prepare yourself and prepare your family. But like I said, that's obviously just my opinion. But this idea of preparedness, like I said, for the reasons I've already mentioned, really goes to hurt the prepper, hurts the prepper's family, and goes to hurt what their goal is that they're really trying to set out to do. Like I said, that's just my opinion. But I think that, we can be logical about how we inventory, and we can be logical about how we go about things. So here are a couple examples. We always talk about these gear reviews, and knives are a great example. Every prepper channel I go to has some kind of knife review, and all these gear reviews. And you have to ask yourself, if you have 100 knives, obviously I'm just using a high number, but some people actually do have 100 knives. If you are stockpiling knives, prepper knives for, a crisis, event, it's good to have one. I'm not disagreeing. I would ask you, what's the purpose of that knife? And common answers that I get are, well, self-defense. If I have to, skin an animal or hunting, things like that. And then my next question always, my follow-up question is, when's the last time you got into a knife fight? Do you have fighting training? When's the last time you went hunting? When's the last time you've actually skinned and gutted an animal? And then ask them, when's the last time you actually used your knife? And if the last time you used your knife was to open the box you got from Amazon that has all your gear in it, well then, I think that goes to the crux of my argument and what I'm saying. Now, I'm not saying don't have 100 knives, but I think that, from a holistic preparedness standpoint, well, maybe if you have the resources for 100 knives, maybe, put a little bit of time in maybe learning some knife fighting, or maybe put some time in actually learning how to use your knife to do certain cuts, or to build certain things, or to skin an animal, right? Harvest an animal. Why don't you use your knives for these applications that you state that you're preparing for? The same thing goes with these really elaborate advanced medical kits, and I am one that has an advanced medical kit, so I think that that's a great idea. And my question is, well, what's in the medical kit? Have you opened the medical kit up? Do you know how to use all the items in the medical kit? Do you actually know how to use a tourniquet properly? Do you actually know how to use pressure dressings properly? Great, you have a surgical kit in there. Do you know how to use forceps? Do you know how to suture? Oh, you don't. Okay, well, you have all this nice gear, you have all this stuff. Have you thought about maybe using those resources and looking at this holistically and taking a medical class, or going out and learning that skill set? Same thing goes with food. You have a 1-year supply of food. Okay, that's great. What's your resupply plan? Have you calculated this into a macro, micronutrient profile? Have you looked at caloric profiles? You know how many servings there is? Is this a part of your usable pantry, your working pantry? So these are all things that aren't just exclusive to one part of prepping, but just the idea that, oh, I got all this stuff, I'm okay, like I said, takes away from what preparedness really is, and really does a disservice, because it's taking away from, what the important narratives and the holistic looks of what preparedness really is. Like I said, in my humble opinion, all these things that I've mentioned, you have all this gear. Have you used it? When's the last time you went to your house, shut the circuit breaker off for a couple days, and just lived off of the skill set that you have and the gear that you have, right? When's the last time you've done that? For most people, 99% of preppers, never. So, like I said, all industries that we can see when it comes to people's lives, whether that be everything from video games, sports, makeup, makeup tutorials, all these different things in our life, we always see that there is this consumer media biased, and everything's about the here and now, the immediate gratification of things. And preparedness is no exception. It's a huge consumer market with a lot of potential for revenue. The media does a great service and disservice, because all you got to do is put a little bit of fear out there, and you can get people to buy just about anything. So I really am encouraging you guys to look at preparedness from a more holistic point of view. And like I said, I am not stating that you shouldn't have a working inventory. I think a working inventory is great, but I really think that if you're going to a channel and the only thing that you're getting is, and you're just inundated with, you got to stockpile this, you got to buy this, you got to buy that, you got to buy this, there's really more to preparedness than that. I mean, if you look at my channel, I'm not asking you to, but if you look at my channel, I have tons of videos, and not one of my videos talks about stockpiling or buying gear or anything like that. This is my one video that I have about talking about stockpiling, and I'm really telling you, the detrimental effects of it. So please look at preparedness and sustainability from a holistic standpoint. Please use common sense and rationale, and look at it from a place of ownership, hard work, and just good old common sense. So I know there's a lot of people that are not going to like this video, and that's great. I want you guys to leave comments in the comment section below. Tell me why you agree with me. Tell me why you disagree with me, and let's have a candid conversation, because the only way I'm going to be better and the only way you're going to be better is if we challenge ourselves. So please explain to me why I'm wrong. Please explain to me why you believe stockpiling is good, and let's have cordial and open dialogue. Well, I hope you guys either enjoyed or didn't enjoy the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, guys, as always, long live the Republic.